Namo Narayanaya. Om 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 Namo Narayanaya. Sahana Bhavatu, Sahano Bonaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahe, Tejasvinavadhitamastu, Ma Vidvisha Vai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Peace, Peace, Peace. Om Bolo Satguru Sivananda Maharaj Ki Jai. Swami Vishnu Devananda Maharaj Ki Jai. Om Namah Shivaya. So we are going to do a short teaching on the topic of the secret of true happiness. So there is a beautiful mantra which says that recognize that Brahman, that ultimate reality, the self, as the highest comprehensive promise of happiness, as all that appears as happiness. That is the eternal source of all happiness, that fulfills the desires of all those who meditate on it. Beautiful mantra. And it gives the secret of happiness. So what does it mean? So first of all, we have to recognize a few things, because the mantra says recognize. It begins with the word recognize, which means something is in front of our eyes and we don't see it. That's the meaning of recognize. It's already there. Learn to see it. Okay, so what does it mean? So first of all, what does it mean true happiness? Right? Who said this is true happiness? Why not that is true happiness? So who said? Right? First of all, we should ask, especially in our times, who said so? Right? So the idea is, you see, the beauty is that in our minds, universally, you will see that the mind desires something. It desires something all the time. The mind is constantly desiring, right? So it goes for chocolate, and then it goes for ice cream, and again, then it goes for, how do you call it? PBJ? PBJ. Peanut butter jelly. So the idea is that the mind always goes for something. Okay? Why? Swami Shivananda says, the mind rises from bliss, ananda, and seeks it vainly in the objects because of ignorance. Meaning, the mind is rising from the source of the Atman. Bliss doesn't mean a mountain of pleasure. Bliss means freedom. Freedom from pleasure and pain. Freedom from happiness and sorrow. It's an absolute thing. Limitlessness. This is called bliss. The mind rises from that. This is at the back of the mind. It's the source. The mind, unable to see its own back, this is called ignorance, looks for what it knows is there, because it just rose from it, in the objects. Okay? Now, you can see that whatever you give your mind, you see, the mind initially sees that happiness in various objects. Meaning, for some reason that we do not understand, certain objects shine with happiness to the mind. It seems like they have this mysterious light in them, the light of happiness. That's how it looks like. You look at the object, you do, right? And you say, wow, this chocolate is really shining, you know? You look if there is the electricity cable there or something, you know, what's shining there? So anyway, the idea is that the mind perceives happiness in various objects. Then you give the object to the mind, and sooner or later, usually quite sooner, the mind will begin to see, it will begin to look behind the object. I think I'm missing something else here, right? Which means this doesn't hold the mind anymore, this object. Mind wandering begins. The mind wanders from the object somewhere else, usually very quickly. Meaning, basically the mind, you see, when the mind wanders, the mind says, wrong address. I thought it's here, it's not here. Let's continue. That's the wandering. The moment the mind wanders, you know the mind is saying, wrong address. Not what I thought. Meaning, although we don't consciously understand what the mind is looking for, we can recognize that the mind deep down knows what it's looking for. Otherwise, it couldn't tell you, this is not it. And it says, this is not it, about everything. It thinks it's this, then it tells you it's not that. So deep down, unconsciously at the moment, the mind understands very well what it is desiring. And because it operates, the desire operates in the subconscious mind, it's not clear to us. We cannot understand because it's unconscious. Unconscious means no understanding. We just feel something, we don't know what it is. So deep down, the mind knows what it's looking for. Okay? Because it does neti on everything. Not this, not this, not this, not this, not this. You see? So, therefore, true happiness is not because someone says it's true happiness. True happiness is because every single desire in the mind of every human being tries to go there every moment. This makes it true happiness. True happiness because this is what the minds of every single person with every single desire is trying to get. All the time. This is why it is true happiness. True happiness means it's the truth, not someone's ideas. You understand? And this is why all minds are trying to constantly get there. That's the truth. Okay? So first of all, this is the meaning of true happiness. Why is it called true happiness? Because it is true happiness. How do we know? The minds of every single person in the world is a proof. It's there. We are looking for something. All the minds say, no this, no this, no this. But it's there. The mind knows what it is, deep down. Cannot recognize at the moment. Okay, so because of the unconscious nature of desire. Now, so it is said, recognize that Brahman, that self, as the highest comprehensive promise of happiness. So what is Brahman? And then it says, as all that appears as happiness. What is Brahman? What is God? What is the self? The yogis say supreme happiness. But supreme happiness is not a term, it's not a concept, it's that thing which the minds of everyone try to land in with every single desire. Okay? Because it is the source of the mind. The mind rises from there. So recognize that Brahman, the ultimate reality, as the supreme happiness. This, it says, the highest promise of happiness. What is the highest promise? Everyone has something which they hold as ideal. It's called the supreme. Many times, the mind creates these ideals unconsciously. We don't recognize that we have this ideal driving us. That's the meaning. Okay? But everyone, every single person in the world has something their mind regards, many times unconsciously so. They don't understand that this is the case, as the highest promise of happiness. If I will attain this, my life will be fulfilled, the mind thinks. Maybe unconsciously, not consciously thinking, but it drives the mind. So this is what, for that person, is called God. Every single person in the world, nothing to do with being religious, spiritual and non-religious, and whatever definition we have. Every single person in the world, even staunch materialists and atheists, worship. Actually, staunch materialists worship more fervently. If you look in their mind, the worship is constant. It's true. It sounds funny, but actually it's true. So what do they worship? All of us worship the highest promise of happiness. That's all. What does it mean to worship? You don't need to be in front of an altar and offer flowers. This is a practice. This helps you to get to something. If your mind is already going there, you're already worshiping. You don't need the altar. So everyone worships something which their mind recognizes as the highest promise of happiness. Now, the only problem is, because of so many unconscious forces in the mind doesn't understand too well things. It's full of wrong understandings. Because of this, the mind worships things which are not really leading for happiness as if they are leading to happiness. It has wrong ideas of what is supreme. You understand? That's all. Like a child, if you ask a child, what is supreme? Immediately they think about a mountain of chocolate. With, how do you call this liquid chocolate that becomes a crust? In the fondue? With fondue covering the whole thing. And you need to break through it to get to the chocolate, you know? What is this? Supreme happiness. In the mind of a child. You understand? So the idea is, maybe physically we are not children, but we have limited ideas of what is happiness. Meaning our minds go towards things which are not actually supreme happiness. That's the meaning. Do you understand? Therefore the mantra begins, recognize Brahman as the supreme happiness, the supreme promise of happiness. Meaning, what do I mean recognize Brahman? You need to study. You need to have teachings. What is the supreme? That's all. The mind needs to be learning. What is that which is actually supreme? See, so everyone is already worshipping. The minds are going somewhere for everyone. This is their God. This is why Lord Jesus says, you cannot worship wealth and God together. He uses the word worship. So the idea is that everyone worships. We need to turn the already taking place unconscious process of worship into a conscious one, where we clearly understand why we are putting the mind in this direction. It's clear to us. Yes, this is the limitlessness. This is what I really want. I understand why I'm putting my mind there. For this, we need teachings. Okay, so this is why we have altars and pujas and meditation. To recognize Brahman as the supreme promise of happiness. It takes a long time for us to understand what is that Brahman, which the mind needs to see as supreme happiness. It's not that you read, oh, this is Brahman. Okay. Okay, so it's a long process of redirecting the desires of the mind through understanding. And then it says, as all that appears as happiness. You see, so why, this is the greatest secret. Why do objects shine as happiness to us? We don't know. If you think about it, you go to the boutique, you can experiment. Okay? Just stand there in front of the chocolate and try to see what is that mysterious light. You know? Then Radha is here, she will give you the permission to take the chocolate and hold it and look at it, you know, to see if you can understand. Why is the chocolate shining to you like this? You will never understand. Not possible. See? So why is it? The Upanishads tell us. Okay? So there is a beautiful teaching, one of the most important Upanishadic teachings, which takes place between a great sage, Yajnavalkya, and his wife, a great sage, Maitreyi, and she asks him to teach her about the self. And he tells her that the husband is dear to the wife not because of the husband, but because of the self, capital S, the husband appears dear. The wife appears dear to the husband, not because of the wife, because of the self. She appears dear. The children are dear to their parents, not because of the children, because of the self. The children appear dear. And it goes through a long list. It's a mantra this big to make sure he covers everything. It tells her, he concludes, everything that is dear to you because of your own self, true self, not because of that object. There is an optical illusion here that you don't recognize. It's the self shining to you as happiness and not the object. Why? What does it mean, the self? The idea is like this. Our mind, you see, the self is already limitless. But the self is knowing through the mind. The self by itself, consciousness, cannot know. It cannot experience anything. Because consciousness is non-dual. There is no experience in non-dual consciousness. The mind is the instrument by which experience comes. Mind means subject-object cognitions. Now, the mind is full of vasanas. Vasanas are what we call tendencies, habitual patterns. These habitual patterns generate a sense of how the self, looking through the mind, is limited. When the self looks through the mind, filled with all these tendencies and impressions, the self appears like you. What is special about you? First of all, very special. Means very particularized. Means full of limitations. Everything about you is just limitations. The body, totally limited. The mind, full of emotions and thoughts and memories and you name it. So much bondage in the mind. Limitations. Now, the self, which is limitless, looks through the mind. And the mind reveals the objects. That's what the mind does. The self is limitless. It looks through the mind, it appears as if it's limited. And it looks at the objects. And it's trying to see its own nature in the objects. It's trying to look for that happiness, which it knows it's there, because this is its nature. It tries to look for it in the objects where its attention goes. So, any object which appears to be able to remove from you, the limited self, the self through the mind, some of its own limitations, will appear to you as having some limitlessness in it. For example, chocolate. Now, this is the secret. Why is the chocolate shining? So it can be dangerous for the boutique to reveal this. So, you see, the chocolate shines because of your sweet tooth. You have vasanas, deep-rooted tendencies of desiring sweets. Relative to your desire of sweet, I need sweet, I'm limited. Without sweets, I'm very limited. And if you eat the sweets, you're also limited, because after 2 donuts, you are done. Right? The stomach says, no, The tongue says, yes, it's a problem. You get into problems. So, you see, you have a sense of being limited. It's called sweet tooth. The chocolate appears to you as being able to relieve you from that limitation. This is why you desire it. You don't desire chocolate because of chocolate. You desire chocolate because your mind sees some limitlessness in the chocolate relative to your perceived limitation. It appears to be able to relieve you of that limitation. This is why the chocolate shines with happiness relative to your limitation. You understand? So the point is, we have so many perceived limitations in us because of our mind. Relative to them, relative to your mind, certain objects stand as being able to relieve you of those limitations. It's an imagination of your mind. It's not true. The mind perceives like this because of its own limitations, its own habitual patterns. Certain objects appear as being able to relieve you of those limitations. This is the happiness you see in the objects. It's limitlessness, falsely imagined in the object. That limitlessness is the true nature of the one who is looking at the object. Falsely perceived in the objects. As long as we don't understand this, the yogis say, our interactions with objects will end in sorrow. Because we don't understand what the mind wants. The mind never wants objects. It's a huge secret. It will destroy all the marketing and entertainment industries. The mind doesn't want objects. The mind wants the limitlessness of its own source. That's all. Not able to understand, because having so much unconscious forces, it imagines it in the objects relative to its own limitations. This is called the secret of happiness. It's a secret. It's called an open secret. Om, Om, Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om, peace, peace, peace. Om Bolo Sadguru Sivananda Maharaj Ki Jai. Swami Vishnu Devananda Maharaj Ki Jai.